Hey, just jump in and let's sing a few hymns together this morning. To God be the glory, great things he has done. The world that he gave us his son. On the second stanza of hymn number 66. In the purchase of blood,
Good morning, church. How are we doing this morning? Come thou fount, come thou king. I love that song. And I love that version that adds the chorus in there. So, welcome back to our live stream, folks. It has been confirmed we did actually get struck by lightning last week, and a number of systems were knocked out, including our internet and our screen. We tried replacing the bulb in the projector, but the projector it's given up the ghost. But that's okay. We'll figure it out. The leadership and the property commission had already been talking about replacing the screen with some screens, with some monitors and such. We just need to get on the ball and really do that quickly at this point. So we'll figure that out. But I appreciate everybody working with us, using the song sheets, kind of like a throwback. We can worship without technology. Trust me, they've been doing it for thousands of years. Hope you got the right bulletin, because last week's bulletin was the exact same color. So pay attention to what's going on in your service this morning. We'll do announcements again later, but I'm really glad to see everyone this morning. I'm really glad for those that texted me last week, where's the live stream? I'm really glad that you're able to join us as well. Let's have a great time in the house of the Lord this morning. Let me pray. Lord, I thank you for this morning, for a beautiful day towards the end of summer, Lord. I pray for those students and teachers getting back this week. But mostly, Lord, I pray for our service this morning. I pray for a time of worship, a time of praise, and a time of learning, Lord, as we hear what Ben has to give to us this morning. I just pray that you'd be with us, that you'd hear us, and that you would be glorified by all that we say, do, sing, and shout this morning. I pray all these things in your Son's precious and holy and powerful name. Amen.
Would you stand with us as we continue? I know who I am, 'cause I know who you are. The cross of salvation was only the start. Now I am chosen, free and forgiven. I have to be tender in a grave. I was called by name, born and raised back to life again. I was made for more. Why would I make a bed in my shame when a fountain of grace is running my way? I know I am yours. I was made for more. I wasn't made to be tender in a grave. I was called by name, born and raised back to life again. I was made for more. Why would I make a bed in my shame when a fountain of grace is running my way? I know I am yours. I was made for more. You may be seated.
Our scripture today is from Mark 7, 1 through 23. The Pharisees gathered around Jesus, together with some legal experts from Jerusalem. They saw that some of his disciples were eating their food with unclean, that is, unwashed, hands. The Pharisees, you see, and indeed all the Jews, don't eat unless they first carefully wash their hands. This is to maintain the tradition of the elders. When they come in from the market, they never eat without baptizing themselves. There are many other traditions which they keep: washing of cups, pots, and bronze dishes. Anyway, the Pharisees and legal experts asked Jesus, "Why don't your disciples follow the tradition of the elders? Why do they eat their food with unwashed hands?" "Isaiah summed you up just right," Jesus replied. "Hypocrites, the lot of you." What he said was this: "With their lips, this people honor me, but with their hearts, they turn away from me. All in vain, they think to worship me. All they teach is human commands." You abandon God's commands and keep human tradition. So, he went on, you have a fine way of setting aside God's command so as to maintain your tradition. Here's an example. Moses said, "Honor your father and mother," and anyone who slanders father or mother would die. But you say, if someone says to their father or mother, "What you might get from me, it's korban," which means given to God. You don't let them do anything else for their father or mother. The net result is that you invalidate God's word through this tradition which you hand on. And there are lots more things like that which you do. Jesus summoned the crowd again. "Listen to me, all of you," he said, "and get this straight. What goes into you from the outside can't make you unclean. What makes you unclean is what comes out from the inside." When they got back into the house, away from the crowd, his disciples asked him about the parable. "You didn't get it either?" he asked. "Don't you see that whatever goes into someone from the outside can't make them unclean? It doesn't go into the heart, it only goes into the stomach and then carries on, out down the drain, cleansing all food." What makes someone unclean, he went on, is what comes out of them. Evil intentions come from the inside, out of people's hearts. Sexual immorality, theft, murder, adultery, greed, wickedness, treachery, debauchery, envy, slander, pride, and stupidity. These evil things all come from the inside. They are what makes someone unclean.
Thank you, Amy. Get my water down there in case my throat gets groggy. Well, good morning, Fellowship Church. It's good to be with you. Pastor Lane did warn me that I should do an introduction because we do have some guests here in the audience. And just in case I go too long, put you to sleep, or say something and you're like, I'm not sure about that guy, just know that I'm not the main scene, Pastor Lane is. So please come back. So as an introduction, my name is Ben Snyder, and my wife Amy just read the scriptures. If anybody's curious, that was from N.T. Wright's translation, and occasionally it's good to hear it in another translation that we're not familiar with, to hear some nuance that we don't always capture. I'm originally from Bremen. My wife and I were missionaries in the Democratic Republic of Congo some years ago with Mission Aviation Fellowship. Have a Master of Divinity from Trinity Evangelical Divinity School and a doctorate from Asbury Seminary in Biblical Studies. I'm also not obviously practicing, but an ordained Anglican priest in the ACNA. And we are, I would say, I guess the best way to put it, becoming members of Fellowship Church. We just haven't, signed the paperwork and everything, but we're working with Pastor Lane to get there. So, but it's a privilege to be here. We did miss last couple Sundays. We were away on vacation and heard about all the lightning strikes and everything. So hopefully it looks like the weather's good. Looks like we're in for good shape today. So would you pray with me? Lord, thank you for your grace, your kindness, and your goodness. And sometimes, Lord, for your rebukes that we need to hear. Sometimes we believe we have it all figured out. We know what the right things are. And we become our own experts. So, Lord, deliver us from that. And help us, Lord, in today's message, Lord, in your word, to examine ourselves and find the places where we are far from you, but we're doing really good doing things. So, Lord, will you speak to us now? In your name we pray. Amen. All right, so I will admit, I was a little nervous when I submitted my title to Pastor Lane. The sermon title is delivered from doo-doo, and my kids are like, no, it's not. And they're like, yeah, it is. They're like, I want to see it. And so they couldn't believe me. But I'm so glad that Pastor Lane saw the light and approved it, so thank you. Since we don't have a projector and visuals today, and we don't even have a screen for you to, so you're going to have to visualize a screen and an image, okay? So exercise your visual imagery. So on the screen behind me, you're going to picture a nice lawn. It's well manicured, green grass, and right in front of that lawn is a sign that says, "Keep off the grass, please." Okay, you got that in your image? And then top left, there's 2 barefoot feet. Guess where it's walking? In the grass. Now, to round out my pun of my sermon title, imagine a little dog doo-doo under the heel of that person that just stepped in it. Now we've come full circle. So imagine this image, someone walking in the grass, and there's a sign that clearly states, "Please keep off the grass. You're not supposed to be there." How many of you are comfortable with that image? Most of us are probably feeling a little anxiety, a little tension with somebody walking in the grass where they're not supposed to be. Is anybody ready to get out of their seat, call out to that person, hey, you're not supposed to be in the grass? Is anybody there? Probably, hopefully. Why does that image generate anxiety for us? What's behind, what's the tension? What's the source of that tension that we feel when we see that? And we can come up with, many other examples. One of the biggest problems about rules is that in laws, once they're established, they require a whole lot of work and energy to maintain them. We have to define terms involved. Like, what is grass exactly? And how do we define keep off? Like, what does that mean? And, does this apply to everybody? Is the owner of the property also supposed to keep off the grass? What if someone is injured and we need to run across that grass? Are there any exceptions to this rule? So we have to define who it applies to, exceptions, penalties. What happens when someone does walk on the grass? We have to decide on any grace periods or if there's second chances. What do we do with repeat offenders? They just don't care. We have to define criteria to determine, did someone actually break the rule? We have to have evidence. And then we also have to, and this is maybe the most tiring, empower someone or an entity to maintain the observation and enforcement of these laws. Hence we have our police force and the sheriffs, and thankful for those entities. But we have to invest money and resources and time and energy into those things. So any rule out there has this same baggage attached to it. Just the other day, one of our boys was going to walk our dog, and another brother was getting involved and causing trouble. And one of the brothers said to the other, "Don't cross this line." So what did the one brother do? He walked over and jumped over the line and back, just to harass the other. But you can think of lots of situations in your workplace. If anybody's been micromanaged, there's oversight. People are watching what you're doing. Maybe you live in a community with an HOA. You got neighbors that, they're peering out their window to see, are your shutters the right color? And you've got observation going on, making sure the rules are being followed. Now, I'm not at all implying that rules are unimportant or necessary for life. But we have to be careful of two extremes. On the one hand, a world without any rules or laws is going to devolve into chaos. Everybody does what's right in their own eyes. We think of judges. On the other, we have a world consumed with rules that stifles human flourishing. And again, if you imagine how you feel when you're micromanaged or being bossed around or whatever, you don't feel fully alive in those moments. There's something oppressing you in a way. So I want you to think about, what are laws and rules for? Who are they for? So I'm going to let you dwell on that a little bit as we unpack Mark 7. And as you know, Pastor Lane is leading us through a series of sermon series on pronouncement stories of Jesus. And just a reminder, these are brief stories in a setting where Jesus is found in opposition or controversy or teaching on some topic that divides him and his opponents, or he's teaching something new. And they come to a climax in which Jesus makes a pronouncement, hence their title, Pronouncement Stories. And I'll also remind you that the Gospels, like the Gospel of Mark, is ancient biography. Now, we all know biography is about the life of a person, their deeds and accomplishments. Ancient biography, of course, followed different conventions. And pronouncement stories are a tool used by the biographer to summarize and epitomize the character, the actions, and the person that's being studied, that important individual. And our passage today contains one of the most challenging and misunderstood pronouncement stories in all the Gospels, leading many to conclude that Jesus somehow overturns the purity laws and the food prohibitions that are mainly outlined in Leviticus. So because ritual purity was a key part of my doctoral studies and in my dissertation, I perhaps foolishly asked Pastor Lane if I could preach on this text. So hopefully you're not sleeping yet. I know that when I mention Leviticus, people so it's my favorite book. But we're going to dive in now and see, how does Mark deliver us from doo-doo? And I just want to clarify, if there's any confusion, I am not talking about poo, okay? I'm talking about doing things, doo-doo, okay? The Pharisees are wanting Jesus. Are you doing the right things, okay? So just in case there's any confusion. So our passage opens with Jesus somewhere in the Galilee region eating with his disciples. There's a crowd somewhere in the vicinity. Both the Pharisees and experts in the law are gathered around him. And Mark is already pointing to controversy, Because you have this image of Jesus and his disciples eating, and there's like this gang, this posse around Jesus. They're ganged up against him, more or less. And notice what they're doing. What are these opponents doing? They got their notebooks out. They're observing. They're watching. They're noticing. What's going on over there? This is a key behavior for people that want to make sure rules are being followed. Now, when our kids are causing trouble and I get too excited and I issue an order, hey, stop doing that, or this is going to happen, I am now committed to observation enforcement, right? I've got to, otherwise what I say doesn't matter. I got to maintain whatever, and if that, enforcement is a little too severe, now I've got myself in a problem because I don't really want to enact that punishment, but yet I want the behavior to stop, right? I don't know if this happens in your family, but I've noticed that the observation enforcement can even spread. So it may go from parent to parent, or it may go from parent to other children, and they happily report on brother so-and-so is doing X, Y, and Z. Mom, Dad, they're doing this, and they want their brother to get in trouble. I'm sure this happens in your workplace. I'm sure this happens if you're a student in your school, and again, in our neighborhoods, these things happen. So in our text in Mark 7, the precise issue at hand, did you get that? At hand? Eating with unwashed hands. That's the issue. We're not talking about hygiene, right? We're not talking about soap and water. We're talking about ritual purification. And Mark goes on to add some additional practices that the Jewish people practiced at that time. Now, the specific question the Pharisees ask is in Mark 7:5. Why do your disciples not live according to, doesn't say the law of Moses. It says according to the tradition of the elders. So that's the standard, but eat with unwashed hands. So that's the question that they want to know an answer to. Now, they say his disciples, but they're really saying, Jesus, why are you teaching your disciples to do this? Because disciples only do what their rabbis teach them, right? So it's their indirect way of calling Jesus out personally. And so I want you to think about, we have the standard, the violation, and the enforcers are all there. What is left unstated in their question? There's something that they're lodging against Jesus. So think about that for a moment. We will answer that question, but I want you to think about that. But before we get there, I just want to lay a little groundwork. This is going to be a 101 high overview of ritual purification because that is critical to our text and what is going on in this passage. So besides washing hands, Mark explains to his readers that anyone following Pharisaic practices baptizes themselves before eating, if returning from the marketplace, okay? Most of your English translations are going to say wash or something like that. The same word that we use or transliterate baptize is the verb used here. So they come home from the marketplace. We're talking full body immersion in a bath. And this is not simply just another hand washing. Now, if they were relaxing around the house, they know they're already clean, they're just going to wash their hands because they believe the hands, because we touch things. Think about COVID. We weren't supposed to touch our faces and how hard that was. Their hands pick up uncleanness. Now, the Bible doesn't teach that, but that's what the Pharisees believed. So our Bibles consistently will translate the Greek term there instead of transliterating it baptize. So we need to understand, why are they washing? What's this business about the marketplace? Kettles, and some manuscripts even talk about dining couches, like immersing these dining couches. So this 101, here we go. There's two kinds of purity in the Hebrew Bible, and Hebrew Bible is what we call the Old Testament. One is ritual, and one is moral. Now, most of us know what moral impurity is. It's the things that we do wrong or don't do good. But sometimes the same terminology is used for both kinds of impurity. So I could talk about, if I said, hey, I got clean hands here. I've washed my hands in soap. I'm ready to eat. Where's the food? I want to dig in. So I'm talking about hygienic purity. I can also say, I got clean hands, and you're coming at me with an accusation, and I'm innocent. I don't know what you're talking about. I'm not involved in this accusation. I'm morally clean. So when I say clean hands, I can use the same word and mean two different kinds of purity. So in the Hebrew Bible, the same thing is happening. And it's the context, of course, that matters. So if I say I got a clean heart, nobody imagines me ripping out my heart, washing it in the water, sticking it back in. I'm clearly talking about moral purity at that point. So some contemporary cultures actually still do practice ritual purity, but we Westerners, we have no category for this at all. So the best analogy I can lead you to would be hygiene, bacteria, and the spread of bacteria. That might be the closest we can come to. But in the Hebrew Bible, these two purities are distinguished clearly. One being their source, simply being a human being. If you're human today, you are probably on a daily basis could become unclean. And that is not sinful, okay? There's nothing wrong with that. It's just that we'll talk about those sources. But what's the source of moral impurity? It's doing evil or not doing good, okay? The sources of impurity are totally different. Is becoming ritually unclean sin? No. Is moral impurity sin? Of course. That's by definition. Ritual, as we mentioned, is physical. So if I were unclean and touched this pulpit, now the pulpit's unclean. If I touched you, you would be unclean, and it passes. Moral impurity, this may surprise some of you, it was actually airborne. And what do I mean by that? When you committed sin, it actually traveled to and defiled the temple itself. So when sacrifice was made and blood was applied to the altar and to the Holy of Holies on the Day of Atonement, the purpose of it was to cleanse those items from the defilement that accumulated throughout the year. So it was this airborne defilement that contaminated the temple. Ritual impurity was kind of short duration. Moral was long-term. And to resolve it, you had two different ways of resolving. Ritual impurity was usually washing of water, sometimes waiting a certain time frame. There were a few other cases where you did something else. Moral impurity, you got atonement, punishment, exile. There was just some impurities that could only be cured by the exile of the people. And you have King David as an example where there was no resolution. You just throw yourself at God's mercy. So y'all with me? There's a difference between ritual impurity and moral impurity. Ritual is not sinful. Moral, of course, is. All right, so to be ritually unclean is completely human. It's part of being who we are. So here's your pop quiz. You're on your knowledge of Leviticus. Okay, wake up. Pop quiz. What are the main causes of ritual impurity? Does anybody know? Some of you know. Sexual relations. That would be from Leviticus 15. Childbirth. Anyone have a child? We've had some babies recently. Menstruation. Skin and house diseases. Yes, there was a thing of house disease back then. Leviticus 13 to 14. Corpses. Human and animal corpses also are sources of impurity. So you can see that most people all the time were unclean at some point. And there's completely normal, completely part of being a human. Now, just to give you an idea of how this impacts daily life, you wake up, you have a discharge from your body that promotes uncleanness. Your bed is now unclean. Anyone you touch is unclean. Any item in your house you touch is unclean. Anyone who you spit on accidentally is unclean. I don't know why they do that, but anything you ride on, your donkey saddle or your car that you just got in is now unclean. And anything that comes into your contact is unclean. And imagine you're eating your, Old Testament Wheaties, and you're having a good breakfast, and you forgot, and you used the clay bowl instead of the, I don't know if they had glass back then, but you didn't use the glass bowl, you used the clay bowl. You now have to break that bowl on the ground because you can't make that bowl clean anymore. Now your wood utensil, your spoon, you can wash that, and it's good. So there was rules as to what could be clean again and what couldn't. So the clay pot, you had to break it. Now, I just want to mention something real quick, because sometimes, we get excited that there was 613 laws that they had to follow, and how could that be, and that's so confusing. Just think for a second, how many of you drove to church today? Probably most of you, maybe all of you, or rode with someone who did. How many traffic laws did you observe without thinking about it on your way to church? Probably a lot. And it didn't even enter your brain to think, oh, do I need to stop at this light or do I stop at this light? Like, you didn't spend any energy. You just know that I have to do this. So anyone in that time that, these were the laws by which they lived, it was kind of ingrained in them like culture. They knew these are the things that we're supposed to do. So circling back to Mark, I've just kind of laid out like how this impurity thing works. Why would the Pharisees, who thought you had to be clean before you eat, why would they immerse upon returning from the marketplace? So they're at, Alibaba with their, flip-flops on and buggy bumping, into people. You get bumped into by who knows who. Are they clean? Are they unclean? You have no idea. So if you're in a public space, you're going to go back home, and just to be sure, you're going to immerse yourself and make sure you're clean. So that's why they would do this. Now, if you're chilling around the house, you're clean, you're clean. Again, the Pharisees were of the opinion, before I eat, I got to wash my hands because I don't know what my hands have touched. All right, so is everybody on the same page there? So, again, most people all the time were unclean, even holy priests. Okay, holy priests, Old Testament priests, were they married or not married? They were married, remember? They had kids. That's how the priestly line was propagated. So they became unclean, but they were holy. That's okay. Holy priests can become unclean. They just have to fix it. They have to resolve it, just like the people of Israel had to fix it. So the solution, as I said, was usually some kind of washing. Now, none of this took place at the temple or was even dependent on the temple. Resolving impurity, ritual impurity. They just had to fix it. And the Bible never explains why these particular sources caused impurity, but they were key to distinguishing the people of Israel, as Leviticus 15:31 and 10:10 explain. Now, they were related to the fact that God dwelt in their midst at the temple. To disregard or to ignore these commands would generate moral impurity. Okay, so if you're ritually impure, that's not a sin. But to say, I'm not going to obey it today, I don't care about this, these laws are stupid anyway. You can't even see the impurity. This can't be real. That is, you're breaking God's law because God commanded you to do these things. That generates moral impurity. And that is why, my friends, the Pharisees cared about Jesus eating with unclean hands. And I've just given you the answer to my previous question. What was left unstated in the question of the Pharisees to Jesus? That you are a sinner, and your followers are sinners because you don't follow the tradition of our elders. Now, the tradition of the elders was designed as a fence around Torah, the teaching, so that they wouldn't break Torah, right? So that's why they had this rule. So that was the purpose of it. Now, for those of you who are worried, is this guy ever going to get to the first bullet point on your bulletin outline? Here we are. We've arrived to the first bullet point. And we're going to look at Mark 7:6-8. Jesus invites us to mull over our motives. To mull over our motives. And this is in relationship, of course, in our context to rulemaking and enforcement. Now, I hope you can appreciate my awesome attempt at alliteration that Pastor Lane does so amazing at. That was like 7 A's in a row there. All right. Jesus knows that the Pharisees are not interested in honestly debating whether the Jewish law actually requires hand washing before eating. That's not their interest. They're there to say, hey, everybody, hey, crowd that's around Jesus, look at what he's doing. He's eating with unclean hands. No. So a funny story to illustrate this. One Saturday, our doorbell rings, and there's this strange couple at our door. Never met them. They're holding a cardboard box that's empty. Okay, that's interesting. They have a cat in there, we're not sure. And this box has an address label on it with our address. Of course, that's how they found us. So then they ask us, now why is your cardboard box in our dumpster? And we're like, what in the world? We cannot figure this out. So we were speechless for a moment. Just one, like, why is somebody at our door with a cardboard box? And two, how did this box get over there? I have no idea. We're just at a loss. And then we finally realized Amy's parents have a condo in town. They ordered something, had it delivered to our house, of course, because no one lives at that address, because they live in East Tennessee, to receive that package. So when they came for a visit, they opened the box, throw it in the dumpster, right? So after explaining everything, everything was mostly okay, but I was still like disturbed the whole day. Like, why does someone feel the need to dig trash out of a dumpster? And then to like find, whose is this? Whose box is this? As if, we're illegally taking up dumpster space. I mean, it just blew my mind. And there was this injustice that had to be fixed. And they took time out of their day to come disturb our day to make sure that we were alerted that, the implication, of course, was that we're bad people. We need to stop this and we need to fix it. Like, it was just amazing. So I won't tell any more stories, but we've had some other bizarre interactions with that HOA in other cases. But anyway, Jesus is being called out publicly in a similar way. His disconnected response, or what seems to be a disconnected response, because he doesn't answer their question, it seems. He just goes right to Isaiah, you hypocrites, your hearts are far from me. Like, it doesn't seem connected to what they're asking. But Jesus, in his response, is letting them know, I know exactly where you're going with this question, guys. You're accusing me of being sinful. Well, guess what? You guys are the real sinners here. And I want to add that the word hypocrite, of course, carries some connotations in our current day. In that day, it was the word for actor. And Jesus is saying, you guys are actors. This is exactly what Isaiah says. You're publicly living out this way, and you're performing an act. And you see in the Gospels, Jesus pick up on the Pharisees and their public displays of religiosity. So he's picking up on that public display. That's why he calls them actors. So in Jesus' view, the tradition of the elders that the Pharisees are all upset about leads the Pharisees outwardly to show their devotion while they are far from God in his heart. So he does not have a problem with the law of Moses, which nowhere requires the washing of hands before you eat, or even to become clean before you eat, unless you were a priest and you're eating holy food. That was the only case where you had to do that. But he has a problem with the extra oral laws, the fence that they've added to the written word. So that brings us to our second bullet point. Jesus invites us to order our obedience. Jesus invites us to order our obedience. So obviously the Pharisees have put in first place their oral Torah, their oral teaching. And in Mark 7:9-13, he demonstrates how the tradition of the elders, which is supposed to help them keep from breaking the law, actually leads them to break the law. That's confusing. So he notes that they place human tradition in front of divine authority, and this leads to behavior that God abhors, and that is the dishonor and the insult of one's parents. So like all influencers, we have contemporary influencer movement. The Pharisees were in that movement back then. They had self-interest at play. Again, they're actors. They're out in public trying to build a following. And their self-interest in the rulemaking, it was about them, their performance, their expertise. And if you're going to have influence in the public sphere, you have to demonstrate that to the public. Like, here we are, we're the experts, you got to follow us. It's not really about others' well-being or the well-being of others. Now, we know the Pharisees had great influence on the public. From Josephus, he was an ancient historian. He says this about the Pharisees and the Sadducees. The Pharisees had passed on to the people certain regulations handed down by former generations and not recorded in the law of Moses, for which reason they are rejected by Jesus. No, it doesn't say Jesus, by the Sadducees. So look at that. The Sadducees and the Pharisees did not agree on these things. And there were actually several other groups in the time of Jesus. And that's why scholars tend to talk of Judaisms, plural, because there were a lot of different groups, kind of like our denominations. We have, certain views on this and that. There were different groups. This is the right way to follow God. This is the right way to follow God. You're doing it wrong. So they had different groups, and the Sadducees hold only that you have to follow the written word. You don't follow the tradition of the elders. He goes on to say the two parties came to have controversies, just like we see with Jesus, and serious differences. That the Sadducees, having the confidence of the wealthy alone, so the Sadducees were in the pockets of the rich, had no influence on the populace, while the Pharisees have the support of the masses. And that's exactly what we see in the Gospels, right? The Pharisees have, and even Jesus' own disciples are like, Jesus, can you explain this? It's like, aren't the Pharisees right about this? Like they don't understand, and they want an explanation. So just want to underscore that the Sadducees would have agreed with Jesus on this point if they were present in this debate. They would have sided with him. Now, the worst part of this tradition of the elders and the Pharisees that Jesus is so angry with is that they are teaching others to sin. They're leading others. So Jesus calls them blind guides. They're blind because they can't see how their oral tradition was leading them to wrong. So the example Jesus gives is if you tell anyone, your father or mother, hey, mom and dad would love to help you in your old age. You didn't take out that long-term care policy. I'm really sorry about that. Can't do much for you. The property and the businesses I own, they're korban. And that is a term meant to say, I devote this to God. Now, as soon as you declare that, generally speaking, it becomes holy, set apart, and you cannot then sell it and use it for common purpose. So this was a strategy that the Pharisees were teaching the people to do, and in some cases, they could continue to benefit from their property, just not use it for their parents. So they are nullifying the Word of God, which is one of the 10 Commandments, to honor your parents. Now, I'm going to jump ahead because there's an interesting discussion in rabbinic literature about honoring parents. Our rabbis taught what is reverence for parents and what is honor. So they want to distinguish what's the difference between reverencing our parents and honoring our parents. Reverence refers to one who does not sit in his parents' place, does not stand in his parents' place, does not contradict his parents' opinions, and does not judge his parents' disputes. So that's reverence. Honor refers to one who, listen to this, feeds his father and mother and gives him or her drink and clothes him or her and covers him or her and helps him or her to enter and exit. So Amy and I both work in health insurance. We're owners of Guidepost Insurance, work primarily with Medicare. And this is long-term care that we're talking about here. So in their view, that was showing honor to their parents. So you can see where Jesus is like, you declare korban to kind of isolate and keep separate. It's almost like declaring your inheritance to an organization. So, I don't want the kids to have it. It's kind of going the other direction where the kids are keeping resources from their parents. So that's why he's so upset. So in a brave show of religiosity, somebody could be like, hey, look at me, I'm spiritual. I just korbaned all my stuff to God, and oops, I can't help you, Mom and Dad. Sorry about that. That's what he's upset about. So it's like, what do you do when two laws come in conflict with one another? So, the common example is, I'm speeding to the hospital because, I've got this terrible cut, or, my wife's in delivery, or, whatever's going on. I'm breaking the law so I can protect a higher good. We have a lot, or, if you're in a double line zone, can I pass that Amish buggy? Is it safe? Is it legal? So when two laws come in conflict, that's what's going on there. Now, Jesus, you'll notice, doesn't pull any punches here. We all know the Gospels at the end call for Jesus' death penalty, right? They counsel together, we got to kill this guy. Jesus beats them to the punch. Because in the law of Moses, it says, you insult your father and mother, you should be put to death. So Jesus is like, not only are you breaking God's law, but hey, by the way, you should be executed according to the law of Moses. So he's quoting, of course, Exodus 20, Exodus 21, and Leviticus and Deuteronomy there. But Jesus continually in this passage distinguishes, because he's appealing to the law of Moses to make his response to them, he's distinguishing between it and the tradition of the elders, or human tradition. So I just wonder in this, as we think about ourselves, where might Jesus call us out to rightly order our obedience? Because we, in our Christian following, in our Christian culture, and even in broader culture, we have things that we think identify a good person. But what ways are we putting, this is hard to think about, but what ways are we promoting non-biblical teaching that we think is good and right that actually leads us to break God's law? And what being a good Christian really means. All right, so this question brings us to the last point in our outline in the bulletin. Jesus invites us to humble our hearts. Humble our hearts. So Mark 7:17 to 23. So here Jesus calls the crowd back to publicly answer, finally, the charge raised against him about eating with hands not washed. So his answer is perfectly in line with the law and the logic of Leviticus in terms of how impurity works. It leaves the body, it doesn't come into the body. So he says the impurity leaves the body. So he does get to the moral at the end, but his ruling is actually accurate in terms of how ritual impurity works as well. So he gives them his answer and is inviting them to change their opinion on the matter, which of course was never the discussion. So he rejects their innovation of this whole idea of hands. And so what was weird about it is that you could get your hands unclean somehow, but it wouldn't make your body unclean. So he rejected that innovation, again, not taught by the Mosaic law, and maintains that ingesting food, if your hands are not clean, does not make your body unclean. It doesn't. You can eat it. There's no problem. Again, the Sadducees would have agreed. As Yair Furstenberg, who's another scholar, said, the biblical law, which Jesus favors, posits the person, that's us, as the source of contamination of foods and vessels, whereas the Pharisees were concerned in the opposite direction. They were concerned with the contamination of the person. So Jesus drives home this point further when he meets privately to explain human digestion, right? The eating process. You put food in, it goes to the stomach, and then where does it go? It goes, is poo-poo in the latrine. Cleansing all food. So it gets processed. And Jesus is not here announcing, hey guys, we can all eat pork now. We all want to bacon every morning for breakfast. That is not what Jesus is saying here. And he's also not criticizing ritual purification. He's just disagreeing that you have to wash your hands before you eat. It was the tradition of the elders that he was after. And more important, and this is where Jesus ends, is that more important to him than this legal ruling of, hey, I really don't think Jesus was all that concerned about the eating with unwashed hands, but it was the heart of his audience. Because that's where he starts with the Pharisees. He knows he's being accused of being a sinner, and he's now teaching his, in this private following, his disciples. That's what Ben Witherington, one of my professors, would say about the disciples. Because if you read Mark, they don't get it most of the time. They're like, duh, can you explain this, the disciples? I thought it was a little harsh, but anyway. But more important is the heart. So in this private lesson, he clarifies that the heart is the source of moral impurity. Whereas food coming in, again, direction's important here, food coming in goes not into the heart, because that's where the moral impurity comes from. Jesus is being accused of being a sinner. It's not coming out of his heart. The food's going into his stomach, and it's going out in the latrine. Not hand washing can't be a sin because Moses didn't prohibit it. God didn't say, don't do that. So it can't be a sin. So moral impurity comes out of the heart. As we saw, ritual impurity comes out of the body. It's outward direction, not inward direction. So as we conclude, I do want to clarify a couple things regarding the Pharisees. And I really, it's hard because the Gospels are like, they're really hard on the Pharisees. Just a reminder, there are Pharisees that came to faith in Jesus, so they're not all bad people. But they're often the pulpit punching bag, and that's great because we get off the hook, right? Oh, look at those bad Pharisees. It's also not great because it's really not fair to them, and and when we do that pulpit punching bag, and that's not my goal this morning, is we get to avoid our own conviction, confession, repentance, and so on. Often we are very much like the people of Israel and very much like the Pharisees. We just have to take the time to be challenged by Jesus and see where those places are. And I will say, as far as the Pharisees go, in their own way, they were trying to honor and follow God the best they could. And of course, there was some blindness there. I think if Jesus were to come in our day and look at our church, I don't mean just fellowship, I just mean the church worldwide, I'm sure that there's going to be some critiques that we would find hard to swallow because we think we're doing it right. Guess what? The Pharisees thought the same thing. So there are ways. So our question today that I want to leave you with is, what are some ways that we do the same thing? Where and how do we uphold our understanding of God's law, what we're supposed to do as followers of Jesus, in ways that are actually contrary to it? I have a couple of ideas, but just think about that. And we must be cautious that we don't make ourselves godlike in our rulemaking and enforcement, because that can happen. And I find it interesting that when we make rules and we enforce rules, our hearts are tested. Our hearts are tested in that moment. That's exactly what's going on in this confrontation with Jesus. And it's also where our hearts can be deceived. So in my own journey, I've found when I'm more focused on rules and doing what's right, I become more self-righteous. I get more critical of others. And I'm a detailed person, so that's a bad thing. It's just my details are out there instead of right here. And I get less empathetic. I'm not so much concerned with the well-being of those around me because the rule becomes what's important. And I'm very self-focused in terms of me. So I, for one, am grateful that Jesus delivers me from both kinds of doo-doo. Okay, both kinds. So how about you? Thank you very much.
Church Warsaw, we're so glad that you joined us today, and we hope that you'll continue in the weeks ahead. If you would like to make contact, I'd love to have the opportunity to pray with you, to talk with you, and contact information is right there on the screen in front of you. And perhaps as you make contact, we can figure out a more personal way to do that in the future. Again, thank you for joining us. God bless you. Have a great week.